Corey was a really good-looking guy. Tall, black, handsome. He had this really clean cut that looked dangerously seductive. Even as a white girl, I knew he had the black man effect on me. I used to tell everyone who asked that he was the calmest person I'd ever been with. He seemed so quiet, but looking back now, that's what made this whole thing so messy. Anyway, we broke up in the spring of last year, and it wasn't over some big, explosive fight. It was more like a slow accumulation of smaller ones. Corey always needed to know exactly where I was and who I was with. Whenever we had disagreements, I would be the one to apologize, even in the moments I was clearly the one who'd been wronged. So I just ended things as peacefully as I could, because I still had some love and respect for him. A month after that, I returned to my life without him and let myself believe we were two mature people who were quietly moving on with their lives. Then one night, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. There was no name attached. When I opened the loaded message, it was Corey, lying on an empty road in the dark, eyes closed, one arm bent beneath him at a very confusing angle. And underneath the photo was a short text. "If you don't forgive him, we will kill him." I sat there, holding my phone for a long time, trying to make sense of that message. It looked kind of fishy, but I didn't want to assume things, so I called him. He answered on the second ring, and his voice thick like he'd just woken up. I asked him what the hell was going on, and told me he had absolutely no idea what I was talking about, that he'd been asleep for hours, and maybe someone out there was using old pictures of him to mess with me. I asked him why the road in that photo looked exactly like the one 2 blocks from his new place. He paused, and then he just hung up. I didn't forgive him. Neither did I play along with whatever performance he'd set up. He even threatened me afterwards, but I filed a report anyway. And for a while after that, I thought it was over. And I told myself the whole ordeal was finally behind me. My mum convinced me to change my number, but I didn't see the need to. He seemed to be off my case. What I didn't realize was that Corey hadn't disappeared at all. He'd just gotten better at not being seen. He started showing up at a coffee shop I often visited, driving past my street at hours that made no sense unless he was looking for something. One night, I noticed him near my building, and I called my friend Kayla immediately. She said, "First thing in the morning, get a restraining order." That night, I stayed awake till I was sure he was gone. I couldn't even decide whether to be really scared or really angry. The next morning, I got up early, and I was getting ready to head out when I heard a knock. I let out a sigh because I could tell that it was the neighbor who just liked to chit-chat whenever something exciting was happening in her life. I told her I was heading out and I didn't have the time, but she said, "Just come over here and look out the window," grinning from ear to ear over this guy she'd just met completely by chance. And there he was, waiting by his car to pick her up on their first date. I didn't know who was in a bigger mess, her or me. I've been itching to tell this story, but I have to do it in the most discreet way possible. So we're going to call my ex T. I dated T for a little over a year, and I'm going to be super real when I say I mostly did it for the money. He's a generous man, and I just believed that I'd grow to love him. And I did. I really did. But there was a clause. Rich guys have this thing with control. It's almost like it comes with the money. T was the type to comment on what I ordered at restaurants. He would make remarks that made me second-guess myself every single time. He'd go through my phone occasionally, saying he was just curious. And I let it slide because I didn't want to make something out of nothing. One of the strangest parts of that relationship, though, was how he wanted control over simple things. like my hair. Right before we broke up, I wanted highlights, just something to brighten up what's naturally a pretty dark blonde, and he told me it was a waste of money. Mind you, this was my own money, my own appointment, so automatically my own choice to make. I felt so thrown off by how firm he was about it, considering it had nothing to do with him at all, but I didn't want to fight over something so minor, so I let it go and stayed natural. But that wasn't the end of it. A few weeks later, he brought it up again, but with a different plan entirely. He said to just grab a box of bleach from the grocery store and do it myself at home. I told him no, plainly, because drugstore bleach on hair like mine would fry it. My plan was to either going to a salon to do it properly or staying exactly as I was. He didn't yell about it. He never really yelled about anything. He just got that flat, unreadable look he'd get whenever I disagreed with him on something he'd already decided, and then he dropped it. I didn't understand yet that he was seriously recalculating. A few nights before my birthday, I went to bed the way I normally do. There was no argument at all. I had even told him I wanted to cuddle, but he was gaming. I woke up the next morning and something felt off. I felt a tightness across my scalp, a faint chemical smell hanging in the air of the room. When I finally got to the mirror, my hair wasn't dark blonde anymore. It was completely white, stripped of all its color, and it didn't even feel like hair anymore. It felt like sandpaper under my fingers, dry and brittle in a way I'd never experienced. Even my eyebrows had gone completely white. It took me a while to actually piece together what had happened, because I thought I was losing my mind. T had taken the humidifier in our room and filled it with hydrogen peroxide instead of water, then let it run beside me for hours while I slept, slowly turning the room into a kind of makeshift bleaching chamber. He'd gotten the exact color he'd been pushing for weeks, and when I finally confronted him, he didn't apologize. If anything, he seemed almost pleased with himself, like he'd solved a problem for me. It took nearly 4 years of cutting, growing, and slowly nursing my hair back before it looked anything close to healthy again. And yes, I dumped him 3 days later. I hope he doesn't see this, because there's no telling what he could do. I was married to a man named Jason for about 5 years, and we already had one son together when I got pregnant with our second. By that point in the marriage, I'd learned to read his moods the way you learn to read weather. The tone of his voice and small shifts in his expressions told me everything I needed to know. But when we were expecting our second, it seemed like things were okay, until the day of our anatomy scan. When the tech turned the screen toward us and told us that it was a girl, I turned to Jason, and there was no expression on his face. He didn't say congratulations, didn't reach for my hand, didn't do any of the things he'd done the first time around when we found out we were having our son. Instead, he just sank back into the chair beside the exam table and said, "I knew it." His voice had no joy in it anywhere. I sat there with gel still on my stomach, wondering why this looked so much like disappointment. He didn't speak to me again for 3 days. There was no real explanation, just this cold, total withdrawal. I brought it up once on the second day, asked him directly what was going on, and he just said he needed space to process things. This was our child that we were talking about. When my sweet baby girl got here, she came on my birthday, but there was a problem. She came out struggling to breathe. The nurses had her whisked off to the NICU, tubes and monitors, and a plastic box standing between me and my baby. Jason left about an hour after she was born. Not to grab food or check on our son at home, he just left and didn't come back that day or the next. I sat alone in that hospital room, recovering from labor, while my newborn fought to breathe in a unit down the hall. Her father was simply gone, unreachable, absent in the exact moment I needed him most. I didn't see him again until the day we were finally discharged, 2 days later, and he showed up like nothing had happened, like he hadn't vanished during the most frightening 48 hours of our daughter's life. I eventually had to file for divorce when I finally admitted to myself that all of this was some crazy pattern. Jason remained a periodic presence in her life after that, inconsistent in the way he'd always been inconsistent. But my daughter started to see the signs that I had ignored years ago. Last year, when she turned 13, she made a decision entirely on her own and cut him off completely. She didn't ask my permission, and she didn't need it. She'd simply spent 13 years watching him choose himself over her again and again, starting from the day he sank back into a chair and mourned the fact that she wasn't a boy. I've never once tried to talk her out of it. I post strange stories, and I'm here for you every single week. You might want to subscribe so you don't miss anything. I'm Elias, and I'll see you soon.